Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, amma ba'd. So today we're going to be talking about a few centuries of Islamic history. And as one of my friends recently pointed out to me about 25 minutes ago, that it's an injustice to cover these important periods of history in such a short time. And I completely agree with that. But it's more of an injustice to not cover them at all, which is where the majority of Muslims probably are today. So we're gonna quickly cover them inshallah ta'ala. So next. So the Seljuks. We're gonna cover the people known as the Seljuks. The group of Turks, and we've talked about the Turks. The group of Turks from the Oghuz tribe in Central Asia, right? We know where Central Asia is, right? Modern day Uzbekistan, above Afghanistan, we talked about that. So these Turks were living in that region. And up until now, the Turks were living kind of on the borders of what is known as the Muslim world. Right? So and there's a lot of different Turkic people. Okay? At that time, we don't even call them Turkish. They're Turkic, because there's different types of Turks that they're coming from. So the Turkic people from the Oghuz tribe, okay, and the name of the tribe is not important. What I want you to understand is what kind of language they have, the name of their tribe, like what it signifies. So the Oghuz tribe are in Central Asia, and they've been living on the borders of the Muslim world for a very long time, near what's known today as modern day Turkestan. And one of the leaders of this tribe, or the leaders of one of the clans of the tribe, because remember there's a tribe and there are smaller clans inside of a tribe. So one of the leaders of the clans of this tribe, his name was Seljuk. And Seljuk accepted Islam and split off from his own community. So he's one of the people who accepted Islam around the year 374 AH. So we're talking 4th century, kind of nearing the late 4th century. So he accepts Islam and his entire clan accepts Islam. And this is a very significant thing because these people became very powerful and very important figures in Muslim history. So they became known as the Seljuks, after the guy's name, or in Arabic, As-Salajiqa, or in Persian, Saljuqiyan. Okay, so this is a very important group of people, and they actually control a significant part of the Muslim world between the years 446 and 590. Okay, so about almost 150 years, they're kind of like the leaders of the Muslim world at that time. And these are known as the Seljuk people. So they rose to power beginning with their capture of the city of Nishapur, or in Arabic, Naysabur. Very important city. In the year 429, they took over the city. So once they took over the city, now they start establishing their power. They moved into Persia. So what's happening is they're living on the outskirts of Central Asia, near China, above Afghanistan, all these areas. And now they finally accept Islam. They leave their tribe, the Seljuks leave their general tribe, and they start moving into the Muslim lands. And during this time, the Persians had, previously the Sassanid Empire had conquered all of this area. So there's a lot of Persian influence in this region. So they come in and they start appropriating Persian culture. So they start learning the Persian language, which they weren't learning before because they're Turks. They have their own language. So they learn the Persian language. They're Muslims, so they're practicing Islam. They start adopting Persian dress and Persian culture and all of that. So now they're living inside the Muslim world and they're Muslims. So then they start taking more cities. So in 442, they took the city of Isfahan, a very important city as well. And they moved on to the capital of the Khilafah at this time, which is what? What's the capital of the Abbasids? Baghdad. So Baghdad, we talked about last week, was being controlled by a group known as the Buyids or the Buwayhids. And they happened to be Shiites. So they were controlling the capital and they were controlling the Khalifa at this time. So the Seljuks, they come in and they conquer Baghdad and they remove these Shiite Buyids from power and they restore Abbasid control. So what they did was, imagine they could have gone into Baghdad, taken over the place and say, you know what, we're the new rulers now and we're the new Khalifa now. Abbasids are finished, let's get rid of them. and they could have taken over the entire area. But what did they do instead? This is very significant. So we saw before, sometimes people would take over and they say, okay, I'm declaring myself as the Khalifa. But knowing what happened in Islamic history and all of that, they decided, let's leave the Khalifa in place and we're going to just maintain our power as well. So now the Khalifa, Khalifa position is very symbolic. People are sometimes leaving it in place because of stability, like the Shiites, the Buyids for example. They kept the position of Khalifa in place due to stability. The Fatimids did not keep it in place because they felt that they had sufficient amount of power. So you find some people taking over, leave the position of Khalifa in place. Some of them don't leave the position in place. So the Seljuqs, they come and they say, we're going to leave it in place. We have no issue with the Khalifa and we will just be in control and the Khalifa can do his thing, there's no issue. So the guy who took over, his name was Tughril Beg, very famous person in history. So he was given the title of Sultan by the Khalifa of the time, the Abbasid Khalifa of the time. So now you're going to start seeing a lot of people with the title Sultan, and technically they act like they're the Khalifa because they actually have the power of the Khalifa, but they don't have the actual official stamp or status of the Khalifa. So what happened with Tughril Beg is that he started having his name even mentioned in the khutbahs alongside the Khalifa whenever, throughout all the regions where the Abbasids were controlling. So why would you mention the name of the Khalifa in the khutbah? Is this a form of shirk, like associating partners with Allah? No, you'd mention it because you're just making dua for the leader. So you're supplicating for the leader that he's gonna do the right thing and this and that. So there's nothing really wrong as long as the wording is fine. Right? So there's nothing wrong. So they used to mention his name alongside, so they're both being mentioned. So it shows you now how division of power is taking place. But what this did was, it created a strong element within like Baghdad and all of these regions that they were taking over. The entire Persia region was very stable because they had taken over. So the Seljuqs are a very important group of people. Now it gets more interesting. So he was succeeded, Tughril Beg was succeeded by another important leader. His name was Arslan. Okay, you see Turkic names right now. So Alp Arslan, he was a very important figure because he began his career by conquering Transcaucasia. Transcaucasia is Azerbaijan and Armenia. And we saw that these regions were already under Muslim control before. But now they're under Roman control. Why are they under Roman control? The Romans took it back. Right? Who originally had it when the Muslims conquered it? Were they independent states? It was also under the Romans. So the Byzantine Empire is right there on the borders. And you'll find what happened is, some of these places like Azerbaijan, Armenia, they keep switching back and forth. But it's just the leadership that's switching back and forth. The people are generally just staying the same. Right? So the leadership keeps switching back and forth. So the Romans had it. Alp Arslan, he comes in and he takes Azerbaijan, Armenia, and this whole region back from the Romans. Then he decides that, we're not here to fight the Byzantine Empire. So in the year 1069, I apologize, there's 3 dates I forgot to convert. So in the year 1069 CE, you did it? Alhamdulillah, 461. So in the year 461, he makes a peace treaty with the Romans. And he says, look, we don't need to fight. Let's just have peace now. We took this region back. Now we're getting closer. Let's just, deal with our own issues. So he said, why would he make a peace treaty? One, he says we don't need to fight. And two, his main issue right now is with the Fatimids. So he's more concerned with the Fatimids who are where? In Egypt, all right, and other parts of North Africa. He's more concerned with the Ismaili Fatimids in Egypt and in other regions. So then what happens? In the year 1071, which is 460, oh, it's there. So in the year 463, the Romans reach out to him and say, look, we had that small peace treaty. Let's renew the peace treaty. So he says, okay, let's renew the peace treaty. So as soon as he sees, okay, we have peace with the Byzantines, he goes down into Syria in order to deal with the Fatimids because they've been taking over this region of Syria from Egypt. As soon as he starts moving down with his army, what does the Roman Empire do? they decide that they had entered the peace treaty as a fake peace treaty. So they didn't break the treaty. They were tricking him to be distracted by moving towards, and then they wanted to go and take over the entire region and attack him from the back. But he was a very intelligent person, and he had spies all around, so he knew at the moment exactly when they had betrayed him, and they knew that when the peace treaty was actually a fraudulent peace treaty. What he did was he pretended like he moved down, but his army was actually right there. So when the Romans came in to invade, they were in the eastern part of what's known as modern day Turkey, eastern Anatolia. They met at a place called Manzikert. And Manzikert is a very important place now in history, because what very historical battle called the Battle of Manzikert took place in the year 463. So the Seljuks were at war with the Byzantine Empire, and they met in the Battle of Manzikert, and the Seljuks destroyed the Romans, completely destroyed the Romans. And what happened is that once they were defeated, this actually spawned the decline of the Byzantine Empire, from which they never recovered. So you see that in Islamic history so far, the Persian Empire was defeated very quickly. The Byzantine Empire lost a large region of its, lands and everything, but they were not defeated. They were still surviving. They were still, living on for a long time. This battle signifies their downfall and just takes them out of it. But to give you an example, just one of the quick stories we can zoom in, a very interesting story about what the Seljuk people, these Turks, were really like. So Arslan, he captured Emperor Romanos IV Diogenes, however you pronounce that. This is the emperor of the Byzantine Empire who was in the army himself. So he was captured. We're talking about the Roman Empire. The Caesar was captured in this battle. All right? So what happened was he's captured by Arslan. So Arslan asks him, he says, what would you do if I was captured and I came to you as a prisoner? What would you have done with me? So now, imagine you were in his situation. What would you say? So if you say something like, oh, I would forgive you, so you should forgive me, he's probably going to catch you out and kill you. You say you're a liar and kill the guy, right? So the guy was trying to be somewhat honest, because he's smart. He's trying to figure out, why would somebody ask me this kind of question? Imagine you were captured and you're the guy who just, defeated you in battle was asking you this question. You have to think, you have to be really clever. Why is he asking me this question? If I answer this way, he might do this. If I answer that way, he might do that. I have to think of something. So he said, let me try to be a little as honest as possible. If I'm more honest, maybe he'll show some leniency to me. So the Emperor Romanos, he said, perhaps I would have killed you, or I might, go and start, parading around with you in the streets of Constantinople, the capital. And I would show people, look, I captured the, emperor or something like that. So really smart guy. So he threw in and said, maybe I could kill you, or perhaps I just, take you around the city and show, hopefully he was hoping that would be the best punishment for him, right? Just take me around, the Muslim, community in the city and just show how you've captured me. At least my life is okay. I might survive. This is a good answer, actually. So what did Arslan respond? He said, no, my punishment is going to be much worse than that. I forgive you and I set you free. So imagine the guy was probably shaking when he said, you're not going to get this. He said, you're forgiven, you're set free, no problem. So he allowed him, so he said, let's have some negotiations about which lands, you give up some of the lands, and we'll take some of these lands, we'll take some of these lands, you pay us some kind of tribute or whatever, and I'm going to return you back because you already lost the war, so you pay some kind of penalty for losing this war. So they sat down, and to give you, this is a very famous story, and it's a historical fact. So he allowed the emperor, Arslan allowed the emperor to sit at the same table with him, eating the same food, they're having a conversation, right? And they're debating and they're discussing, okay, you should pay me this many gold coins. And the emperor says, no, that's too much. So, okay, fine, let's lower it. You give me that land and you pay me this much for this many months or whatever it is. He said, no, still that's too much. So they started negotiating. Just this shows you the treatment of prisoners when someone has true Islam in their heart. Right? So this is the treatment that the prisoner, he's showing to the prisoner. Within less than a week, he let Romanos free, and Romanos returned back to the Roman Empire. Now, how many people would do something like this? You rarely find something like this in history anywhere. Usually the leader is captured. Oh, we're going to torture this person like crazy. We're going to put his head on a stick and we're going to show everyone, look what we did to him and this and that. So this is, alhamdulillah, this is the way that these practicing Muslims were dealing with people at the time. So within less than a week, he returned back to the Byzantine Empire. But when he returned back, this battle had upset so many things within the Byzantine Empire that it was in a state of chaos and disunity. And in fact, they actually killed Romanos when he went back. So his own people ended up killing him because they were all fighting for power. So he eventually died. So we're seeing a map over here. So where are the Turks coming from, or where are the Seljuks coming from? Which region? Central Asia, which is this region, right? Okay, so this is Central Asia, this whole region right here. So they were living like on the borders down here somewhere, okay? So they started coming in through here. Now they took over this region. They took over the whole Persia, Iran, Baghdad, Iraq, took over this whole region over here. And now the Battle of Manzikert was around here somewhere. So now, after this battle took place, this is where Constantinople is, around here. They took over this entire area over here. So what happens now is, this is where the shift comes. Now that modern day Turkish people, how did they get here? They weren't here at all. They were actually over here in these regions. So now what happens is, now that the Seljuks have this region, all the people on the borders, all the Turks, because they speak the same language, they start migrating over here and they populate this entire region. So now you got Turks in Turkey, modern day Turkey. Okay, so this is interesting. So, and they start going throughout the other regions. They're settling in Persia and they're settling in other regions. So now, because of this, an era of prosperity followed. Why? Because when you have stability and you have good leadership and you have everything is in control militarily, you have a lot of prosperity in that region. Okay, so the Romans are in check now. So the Romans they've gone back. Other rival dynasties like the Buyids, Buwayhids and all that are kind of in check. The Fatimids were being dealt with as well, so they're in check. So you have a lot of prosperity during this time. So under the Seljuks, what you have is another leader who came later on. His name was Malik Shah. Now Malik Shah is a very young, not young kid, but he's a very young man. At that time we didn't call them kids, right? They were young men because they were leaders. But today we would call them like a kid. So what happens is, if you have a very, very young leader in charge, usually they started accompanying him with his right-hand man, his advisor, who has more world, life experience. So that person became known as the vizier now. So his vizier, Malik Shah's vizier, was named Nizam al-Mulk. And Nizam al-Mulk is a very interesting figure, because he started this system of educational bodies, madrasas, known as the Nizamiya Madrasa. And it became a whole system, a chain of, there's not only one. A lot of people think it's just one. It's not one. It's a whole network of madrasas they started establishing around all the different parts of where they were ruling. So he starts this chain, and they're known as Madrasa Nizamiya. Okay, the Nizami Madrasas are named after him. And they're very high, educational centers. But the difference is, they're not independent. So they standardize the curriculum across the board, and everyone's kind of learning the same thing. Now some schools will be better than others. So the main two schools which really stood out were the one in Baghdad, which was founded in the year 457, and the one in Nishapur, or Nisabur, another one. So you find a lot of great scholars coming out of here. And among the teachers who were teaching in this school was Imam al-Juwayni, very important figure. And he was the teacher of Imam al-Ghazali. And Imam al-Ghazali was one of the teachers in the Madrasa Nizamiya in Baghdad. So it shows you what kind of things came out of this Islamic school. So Madrasa Nizamiya, and there's other things. So they're teaching sciences and stuff like that as well. But now they have a standardized curriculum for everything that they're going to be studying. So they're studying philosophy, they're studying logic, they're studying mathematics, then they're studying Islamic law, they're studying tafsir, they're studying hadith, everything across the board. Yeah, Azhar was already established. But this is another style, another system where Azhar is mainly one. Maybe they had a few branches. This is branching around all over the place. So this is to stabilize the curriculum across the board. I mean, they were originally Turkic people, but they started Persianizing and Arabizing themselves. Yeah, they're from Turkey. Yeah, they're from Turkic peoples. Yeah, they're from Turkic people. Everyone wants to claim them, right? So the Arabs will claim them for themselves, and the Turks will claim them for themselves. The Persians will claim them. Anyone who does good, you want to claim it for yourself, you know. So, but no, they were a mix of everything because they got the Persian language, so they were learning Persian, and they were learning Arabic. And many of them, like not Imam Ghazali and stuff, but the leaders, they could still speak their Turkish language. Yeah. A lot of great scholars came out of there. Yeah, it's a very important region. Very, very important region. So you have really great, some history happening over here. Now, Nizam al-Mulk, I'm just going to throw this in there because it's an important part of history as well. He was one of the first major leaders under the Abbasids. This is Seljuks, but the Seljuks are giving authority to the Abbasids. So this is still known as the Abbasid period. He was one of the first major leaders to become the target of an extremist Ismaili group known as the Assassins. So keep in mind, the Ismailis are the Fatimids, right now. What happened was when the Fatimids started declining, the Seljuks started rising, they split off. So one group said, okay, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing. The other group said, you know what, if our power declines from these Abbasids, we're going to get them back somehow. And we need to employ any means necessary to get rid of these Abbasids. So this group forms known as the Assassins or the Hashashin. So this group, they started around 480 and they lasted until 653. So we're talking about almost 2 centuries of this assassin group causing problems. So one of their leaders, he goes and he sets up a fortress like a castle in the outskirts of the region in Persia. So they're in Persia now. And what they do is they train their followers to go and act like normal people. And they're very smart people. These are not like foolish people, right? These are very well-trained people. They know exactly what to look for. They know how to get into high-ranking positions. Very intelligent in terms of geography and language and all of that, so that they can infiltrate. They're like super spies. And what happens is sometimes they're going to be serving as like the right-hand man of some very important position. Right? For 10 years, 15 years, and you think, wow, this is a great guy, and he's doing so many things, and we trust him so much. All of a sudden, 10 years later, 15 years later, he's been in that position, and you find out the whole time he was an assassin all along. And he finally gets a note. Now is the time for you to do what you need to do. It's time for you to take out this general, or take out this sultan, or take out this leader, and then go and assassinate this person and kill them. Nizam al-Mulk was one of the first major leaders who was assassinated by the Hashashin or the assassins. So he was killed. And they would take out generals, they would take out leaders. They said they felt that this is better than fighting the entire Abbasid army with a force, because the Fatimids were already on the decline. This is like the first group of, we saw Khawarij were like a form of terrorists and everything. This is like another group of terrorists. Well, except not terrorists. They're just assassinating leaders. They did not assassinate common people. They only focused on the leaders. But one interesting thing about them was they never committed suicide after assassinating a leader. They were not trained for that. So they go and kill someone, and they would rather get caught and get tortured and then get killed rather than go and kill themselves. So they didn't go stab the guy and then they killed themselves. They would stab the guy, try and escape as much as they can. If they got caught, they would deal with the punishment of getting caught. And there's a lot of stories about how people used to convince them. So one of the things they're known as Hashashin because they used to, one of the theories, and it's a very strong theory, although people criticize it, it's still strong. They used to smoke hashish. So they either use hashish before they go on a mission to get themselves, pumped up, or they were motivated and brainwashed through getting drugged up. So they would get drugged up, and then they would go into this fortress, and in the fortress there was like gardens and women and everything that you needed, everything that you wanted. And they said, look, this is your paradise. And the guy's high and he doesn't realize what's going on. So this is paradise for you, and you see women and you see people serving you and you see gardens and you're high on top of that. And then all of a sudden you're like, this is the best thing I've ever experienced. And then when you wake up, you say, you know what? This guy, who's the leader of the assassin group, he has special powers. And he can get you back into that paradise, but you need to obey him and do exactly what he says. So that's one way that they would motivate people and get them to, do whatever they want. This was like a straight up cult. So they caused a lot of problems. They hit a lot of people, and they injured a lot of people who they tried to assassinate. I believe it was. I think he's the guy who set up the castle in the first place. But they lasted for a very long time, so they had several leaders. The ruins of the castle is still there. Yeah, that's right. It's hard to get to. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why they lasted so long, because they set it up in a place where it's so hard to get in that region. They couldn't even penetrate that fortress. Everyone knew that they were there. Okay, now we move on to the Crusades, and we're moving fast here, as you can see. So next, in the year 487, Pope Urban II, who's so just a quick a history lesson again, is that in Europe, the Roman Empire was divided a long time ago into two empires, the Western part and the Eastern part. The Eastern part had a different form of Christianity than the Western part. And right now we've been talking about the Byzantine Empire the whole time, since the time of the Prophet ﷺ, right? That's because the Western Catholic Church had already declined by the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So the Byzantine Empire was the main part of the Roman Empire, yet the Western part was a lot weaker, but they were still kind of around. The church is still around and everything. So now at this time, we're talking about the Western part of the Roman Empire, which is the Latin Church or the Catholic Church. Okay, so Pope Urban II in France, he issues a declaration of a crusade to capture Jerusalem from the Muslims. So there's like this movement that all of a sudden comes up and says, we need to get in there, and Jerusalem belongs to us, and we need to take it over. And this is like a straight up religious movement. But this is an edict which is being issued from France, right? So the whole Byzantine Empire, Constantinople and all of that, none of these people so far have ever really cared about going into Jerusalem. There's no issue. Right? No one's thinking about, well, we need to go and take Jerusalem. They were taking other places. They didn't care about focusing all their energy only on Jerusalem. But now this group comes up and they say Jerusalem is everything. It's part of our belief system that we should own Jerusalem now. This is brand new ideology. And part of the reason, we're not going to have time to go into details. Part of the reason that is there has to do with politics. Because you see, in Germany, on the other side, that church, which was technically part of the Catholics as well, they were not cooperating with the people in France. And they're having disputes internally with their religion. And the Byzantine Empire is already way too far in terms of their beliefs. So they don't get along with the Western church because they're not Catholics. So what happened now is you have this schism, and the Pope Urban II, he decides, we need some way of, motivating the people around some kind of cause. And we need to establish some kind of power. So this is one of the motives that historians say he probably led him to declare this thing. And there's a lot of propaganda going on and everything. So what happens is he declares what's known as a crusade. We're going to capture Jerusalem and we're going to take it back. Doesn't matter who it belongs to, Muslims or non-Muslim. This is not about just against Muslims. This is just about Jerusalem primarily. So this starts a series of clashes known as the Crusades. And the Muslims call these the cross wars. So they call it al-hurub as-salibiyya. The word cross wars, salib means cross. So the Muslims describe it as cross wars because these are Christians and they're always carrying the cross. And the cross is the most significant thing for them. And they feel that they had the original cross later on and everything. The Christians are calling it crusade because it means you're fighting for, it's holy war basically. This is the only way of defining what holy war really is. They have a particular agenda, particular goal. So this started in 487 and it lasted until 689. So the crusades are not just, it's not one crusade. It's a number of crusades that take place over a period of what is it, 587, 68, so 2 centuries. And there are 7 major crusades and some minor crusades taking place. So 7 major ones over 2 centuries are taking place, and these soldiers are primarily coming from Western Europe. So what happens is they need to reach Muslim lands, so either they're going to sail through the ocean or they're going to cross through Constantinople and then make their way down. First of all, by the way, the first crusade, completely untrained soldiers for the most part. These are like the common people. They just got rived up from a lot of preachers and they started going out. There was a few knights, but mostly like common people. And the people, they thought that you need to reach Jerusalem because the end of the world was coming now. That's the propaganda they got. You see, if you don't make it to Jerusalem, it's going to be, what do they call the end of the world? Apocalypse. Apocalypse is coming. And whoever makes it to Jerusalem is going to be safe. And whoever doesn't make it, they're going to be completely destroyed. So this is everyone and their whole families pack up. We're talking kids and women and children and old people and all of them. They sell everything and they start traveling through and they're joining this entire crusade. Now what happens is you have a big burden of people, right? This is a huge burden for all these families to be migrating. So what happened was the soldiers or other people would start going and taking over every city that they're crossing. And they're crossing through Byzantine territory as well. So when they're crossing through Byzantine territory, they're either taking over a city or killing the people or forcing them to take their money or whatever because they need supplies, or trying to convince them, hey, apocalypse is coming, we need to jump on board, we need to go to Jerusalem. So it's like this movement taking place, but not all the Christians are on board. So actually it's not a Christian versus Muslim thing. It's just this particular area where they got rived up and they're ready to go. So anyways, that's not in the notes, that won't be on your test. So 7 major crusades. The first crusade took place in 489, it lasted until 495, and the Muslims didn't even consider it to be anything serious. Because they're like, Byzantines are always fighting on the borders. These things are happening all the time. This is not a major deal. No one really cared. So the Muslim world, for the most part, they're not even documenting this history. And everyone's concerned and saying, how could the Muslims not, how could they not take this seriously and why didn't they document it and everything? The reality of the situation is, at this point in time, the Crusades were not seen as anything major until about 18th, 19th century. Now, why do you think the Crusades became so important in 18th, 19th century? Because of European colonization. Now the Muslims were the world power. The Byzantine Empire is there, but they're not anywhere near in terms of the power and authority of the Muslim Empire. Now that the Europeans start rising and they start colonizing other lands, now they get this mentality that, hey, this is like the West is taking us over. So now this is like Muslims versus the West, and they're trying to change our beliefs and they're trying to colonize us. So they go back and they start making this huge thing out of the Crusades, even though at that time it was not taken as big. It's an important thing, but it's not as big as many people have made it. So now the Christians take it as a huge thing and the Muslims take it as a huge thing. It's a big thing, but it's not the largest and worst thing that's ever happened in the Muslim world. That's just the point, that you should understand. Okay, so they considered to be like a border clash. But these were not Byzantines. These are not Byzantine forces. So these are people who they have religious fervor. They're not doing it for the empire. These are not people who fight for the Byzantine, they're doing it for Rome. They're doing it for the Byzantine Empire. They're doing it for the Caesar. Political, secular, nationalistic motives. These are purely religious people. Completely different motives, different aims. So they come in the year 492, which is 1099 CE. They come into Jerusalem. Now Jerusalem, we saw how Umar radiallahu anh had taken over Jerusalem. The Seljuks were controlling Jerusalem up until now. 1 year before this, in 491, the Fatimids had managed to take over Jerusalem. Just 1 year prior. So there is little clash going on in terms of leadership. But what happens in Jerusalem is, if the Fatimids take over, or the Seljuks take over, or some other group takes over, it's just the leadership that's changing. Everything else stays intact. The churches stay intact, the Christians are still doing their own thing, because the Fatimids were open to other religions because of Ummah and all that. And the Seljuks, same thing. They were also open to the Christians and the Jews and everything. Now when the Crusaders come in, everything's going to change. So what happens is the Crusaders come in, and according to their own diaries, so this is not something you can dispute. This is their own Crusader soldiers writing in their own diaries and writing letters back to the Pope saying that we massacred the pagans, referring to the Muslims. They're calling them pagans. So it means that they don't know a thing about who these people are. They have no idea who Muslims are, what they believe, anything. We massacred the pagans so badly that they were up to, the Crusaders were up to their own ankles in blood, even at the Temple of Solomon, which for them is considered one of the holiest places that they believe in. So for them is holy, and they say we slaughtered them so badly that literally our feet were drowning in blood. That's how much we killed them. And they slaughtered everyone. So they took out the Jews, they took out the Muslims, and they even took out many of the other Christians that were there. Even the elderly people were killed, the women were killed, the children were killed. One of the Crusaders writes a letter back to the Pope saying that we took the Muslim children and we took those big spikes that you roast lambs on, and we put them through the children, through the babies, and we roasted them and we ate their bodies. We ate their meat. That shows you a little bit about what kind of people these were. Really barbaric people. So they literally killed everyone. The Jews ran into their synagogue thinking that they're going to be protected inside the synagogue. They burned the synagogue to the ground and killed everyone. So they literally massacred everyone. People inside Masjid al-Aqsa, they went inside, they killed everyone inside. So literally everyone was dead. The entire place was so full of dead bodies, it was smelling so bad, they had to start dragging them outside the city, and they made giant pyramids. And they said the pyramids look like buildings. Like the size of the churches and the synagogue, that's how many dead bodies there were. So they massacred the entire place. Okay, they killed everyone. So now obviously the Muslims kind of, realize this is something very, very serious. Okay, so the Crusaders were controlling Jerusalem. We're fast forwarding now. Crusaders are controlling Jerusalem for almost a century. Okay, now some Muslims are getting together, especially a group known as the Zangis. They come together and they're starting to fight the Crusaders, but they don't have enough Muslims. Now you say, how can this happen? It's because by this time the Muslims were in a degenerate state. They're so busy fighting with each other that they can't even focus on getting rid of the Crusaders from this area. So they're too busy. So the Seljuks now had already deteriorated. So they're only busy with fighting the Fatimids. The Fatimids are busy with fighting them. They have internal fights going on. They don't even have time to preoccupy them. They're so preoccupied with their own thing, they can't even do anything about this. Right? In Spain, we already have, we saw what was going on. Some major problems happening in Spain. So who's gonna solve this problem? Who's gonna take care of it? So you have a movement of people who start getting together, and they're Kurdish people. Okay, so now we're talking about another group of people. They're Kurdish soldiers come together, a new group of people, and they start going and fighting, and they start taking a few Crusader areas, because the Crusaders took the entire coast going down towards Jerusalem. So the entire coast of Syria, the whole Syrian region. So they took the whole coast by land as well as by sea. So they had Cyprus, and we saw Cyprus is a very important strategic island. So they took Cyprus again, and they're launching attacks from sea through Cyprus, getting reinforcements as well as people who had gone through the land route. So now, a lot of time passes by, and you have a very important Kurdish soldier come up. His name was Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi. And most people are familiar with his name. He was not some random guy who just popped up out of nowhere. Okay, this is not the way things work. It's not just all of a sudden the Crusaders are dominating this entire region for like a century, and people are just, Masjid al-Aqsa became a stable where they kept their horses. Just think about this, right? So it didn't all of a sudden then, one guy was born and Salah ad-Din comes up and just takes them out all by himself. This is a movement that's been in process for a very long time. Where is Salah ad-Din? And Salah ad-Din is fighting in the army of Nuruddin Zanki. Nuruddin Zanki and his soldiers, like Salahuddin, where are they coming from? Right? Where are they? Why do they have this Islamic spirit whereas everyone else is fighting with Muslims? Muslims are fighting Muslims and all of that. Where's the difference? Well, see, those madrasas, known as Madrasa Nizamiya, people like Imam Ghazali and his teachings and everything that are coming out, these are religious people now. Extremely religious people. And they're coming and learning from these teachers who are coming out of these madrasas. So their students of their students are coming out, and now they're training these people, and these people are becoming soldiers. And they're joining into the army, and they're making victory because they actually have an Islamic understanding. Whereas other people, what happens is if you're a soldier but you don't have Islam, you just fight on whatever side you feel like doing. If that side becomes victorious, let's fight on that side. If your family needs money, you just fight on the side which is going to give your family the monetary support that you need. So this is a group now of people who are coming up, and Salahuddin is one of them, who's coming from an entire group, and he has all the soldiers around him. They're all Islamically inclined. That's what makes them different. Little bit more about Salahuddin. So his family and people in his lineage, they've been fighting the Crusaders for several decades now. They've been making some advances and everything, but they're not there yet. So Salahuddin grew up, young guy. He became the governor of Alexandria at the age of 25. Now who's controlling Egypt at this time? Fatimids. So he's under the Fatimids, right? But he's not Ismaili, but he's still, they used to promote everyone. So he becomes a governor of Alexandria, important city. Then he becomes the minister of Egypt at the age of 31. Okay, so he's a very important personality. He's rising, up to fame. Then finally, in the year 1187, which is equivalent to 583. So in the year 583, there's a very important battle that takes place in Palestine, which is known as the Battle of Hattin. Battle of Hattin, Salahuddin and his army, they defeat a crusader group, even though they were outnumbered 12,000 to 63,000. So even though they're outnumbered, they succeed in defeating the crusaders in this major battle. And once they got this battle done, now they were able to retake Jerusalem. So when Salahuddin came, he besieged the city of Jerusalem. He gave the crusaders several opportunities. You know what? You're outnumbered. Now the tides have turned against you. We defeated, most of your major knights at the Battle of Hattin. Just give up the city. But the crusaders, they're very zealous, religiously motivated people. For them, this is straight up belief, aqidah. It's their belief. They can never abandon Jerusalem. It belongs to them. So they decide they're going to put up a fight. So Salahuddin, he's got all the equipment. He's got the catapults. He's got everything. Finally, after a very long time, he knocks down one of the walls. Once one of the walls falls, there should be no more surrender. Because once one wall falls and your army is much larger than the army inside the fortress, that means that it's over for you, right? But what does Salahuddin do in his character? He still gives them amnesty. He makes a peace agreement with them, and he says, none of you people are going to be killed. None of the people, after all the things that they've done, none of them are going to be killed. He enters into the city of Jerusalem without killing anyone. And his leniency and his mercy was so well respected that it reached Europe, and the Europeans used to look at him as one of the great figures, even at that time. Even though they didn't know anything, they didn't understand anything about Muslims. They hated Muslims, they thought they were the devil and everything, but they say, Salahuddin, this guy, whoever he is, whatever pagan religion he belongs to, he's a really good guy. Because he was so, compassionate. He didn't kill us. He was very honest. He never broke a treaty. Even though the Crusaders would be breaking treaties with him all the time. And he would go and he would give them another chance and give them another chance. When he captured one of them, he would give them, water to drink and treat them nicely and everything. So he became a very important figure even in the European psyche. So he entered the city of Jerusalem, and just think about how the Crusaders entered and what they did. And what Salahuddin could have done. What did he do? He entered the city the same way that the Prophet ﷺ entered the city of Mecca during the day of the conquest of Mecca. And he said, we're not going to harm anyone. He entered the same way that Umar radiallahu anh entered the city of Jerusalem. Gave amnesty to everyone, did not harm anyone. So he entered the city without killing anyone, and he was a very just and righteous leader. So we're not doing him enough justice by just summarizing his life, but it gives you something. So what did he do after taking Jerusalem? After taking Jerusalem, he started recapturing the cities along the coast of Syria. But after he took some of these cities, then he entered into a truce with the Crusaders. Now, why would he do something like this? Would the Crusaders have done something like this for Jerusalem? No. Why? Because he didn't feel it's a religious obligation to go and destroy all of them right now. This is not the point. So he says, right now, we need a peace. We need to deal with other issues right now. So what does he do? He goes back down into Egypt, and he realizes that Egypt, they are the Ismailis. Even though they're somewhat tolerant and everything, there are still some problems there. So he goes and he captures Egypt and he frees it from the Ismailis. The Fatimids are gone. So he gets rid of the Fatimids and he sets up sultanate over there in Egypt. So he does the exact same thing that the Turks did. So what did the Turks do before? I'm the Sultan and you're the Khalifa. So we're still under the Abbasids. So the Abbasid Khalifa has power, but technically I actually have the real power, and I'm just Sultan Salahuddin Ayyubi. And we're under the Abbasids in terms of, symbolically we're under the Abbasids. So he decided to focus his efforts on Egypt, patronize scholarship, tried to repair whatever damage had been done in terms of Egypt, tried to make the region stable. It's very important to focus on internal stability as well. That's why he made this peace agreement with King Richard of England. And it just so happened that during this time, when he made the peace agreement, it was a very good move, because he didn't need to worry about what's going to happen with the Crusaders, because when he signed this peace agreement with King Richard, after a few years, had to go back to England because there was too much internal fighting and turmoil back in Europe. So he left, and pretty much the Crusaders, there was nothing left of them until the next Crusades are being launched. You know, some Crusaders are remaining, but there's no major military power over there. So the Crusaders kind of got out anyways automatically. So it was a very smart move, a very good move. Moving on to the Mongols. So around the beginning of the 7th century, what does 7th century signify? What years? Starting with 600 and ending with 699. Excellent. You know more than the average college student. So now, starting around the beginning of the 7th century, there's an important Mongol. Now we're talking about a different group of people, the Mongols now, coming from the Mongolian area, Mongolia. The Mongol commander, Genghis Khan, very well-known figure in history, Genghis or Genghis Khan. Now, Khan simply means like the leader. And the Genghis or Genghis means like the top leader as well. So this is like the leader of leaders. This is his nickname. He's Genghis Khan. He began to unite all the nomadic tribes of the Mongols around this time. And nomadic people, obviously they're gonna be rough. They're gonna be, if you can unite them together, then they can be a very powerful force. So he started uniting all the different tribes together, and his whole details of his life is not too important, but he got them together and he started conquering the entire region. So he conquered Mongolia, he conquered Central Asia, a lot of the northern parts of Central Asia, and he started conquering China, northern parts of China and everything. So this guy starts just taking over this entire region where he is, first of all, primarily where he is. So what happens is, how does this start affecting us? Well, first of all, when he takes over these regions, he massacres the entire population. So this is not like a civilization, in the sense that civilization, they have kind of more rules or code of laws or everything. These are intelligent people though. Doesn't mean that they don't have scientists. It doesn't mean that they don't have whatever. So especially when he took over China, he started taking the Chinese scientists, the Chinese geographers and everything. They had civilization, but they were very ruthless people. So why this becomes really important in Islamic history is his grandson. So the grandson of Genghis Khan, Hulagu Khan, or Hulaku Khan, they're pronounced two ways. He continues this tradition of his grandfather, and he starts sweeping through the entire Muslim world. He takes over Persia, starts coming, we're talking about northeast. So he sweeps through and starts taking Persia. He takes Central Asia, Persia, Iraq, makes it all the way to Syria and takes over like more than half of the entire Muslim world within 5 years. This is huge. Within 5 years, he takes the entire region. But when we say takes, we don't just mean takes control of. Takes control of and literally wipes out the population who does not surrender to him in the beginning. So what happens is, so he's not just killing them, but what happens is he says, you surrender to me. If you surrender, you're maybe okay. If you don't surrender, you put up a fight. The moment you lose the fight, what a normal army would do is you kill the soldiers. They don't kill the soldiers. They come in and they say the entire population is responsible, and they wipe out the population. So let's take an example of just one place which they wiped out, which was Baghdad. Baghdad was the capital, the most flourishing region in the Muslim world at the time, because it's the capital. All the universities are there, the schools are there, the palaces are there, the Khalifa is living there. So he comes in the year 655 into Baghdad, and he slaughters almost 1 million people. Now can you imagine, at that time, that's like the size of the city, right? Almost the entire city is completely wiped out. So these Mongol hordes, they came in and they destroyed everything. So they didn't just kill the people, they destroyed the masjids, they destroyed the libraries, they destroyed the palaces, they just wiped out everything that they could. They like literally burnt the city down to the ground. Because they don't care. See, normally if the Persians came in, or the Byzantines came in, what they would do is, they might kill a lot of people, but they say, oh, we're going to make this our headquarters, this is a great place, we're going to take over the fortresses, and we're going to take over the palaces, and we're going to take over this region. And everything that's built, we're going to use it for ourselves. But these guys, they just wipe out everything. So they said the Tigris River, which was near Baghdad, they say it became a mixture of black and red. So a river would normally be color of water. Say this river, the whole river became black and red. Black from all the ink that all the books they had thrown into the river. The whole river became black, and then they were killing all the people. It became red with their blood. This is what the Mongols had done. So they destroyed everything across the board. And then they said Baghdad, it smelled so bad because of the dead bodies that he abandoned the city as well, and they moved somewhere else. They said, we can't even keep our camp here anymore. That's how bad it is. So the Mongols were probably the worst thing that had ever happened in the history of Islam to any region. They just decimated everything, destroyed the population, destroyed the books, destroyed everything. That's why if you say, you know what, well, where's all the great achievements and everything? We have amazing books in Islamic history, but over 90% of our intellectual heritage has been destroyed. Not just by the Mongols, by others, by, the Inquisition, different groups who destroyed everything, but the Mongols were one of the main sources of the destruction. So what happens is, this was a very bad time, obviously, in Muslim history. So what happens now, we're moving on to a region, a time, 649 to 923. We have a group known as the Mamluks. Now the Mamluks is another group of people. They're also Turks, and they take control of Egypt and parts of North Africa. Now, who was controlling Egypt up until now? We've moved really fast forward in history, right? Who was controlling Egypt up until now? Not the Fatimids were gone. Salahuddin. So the Ayyubids, the people from Salahuddin Ayyubi's family were controlling, but we're talking about fast forwarding, right? Doesn't mean that every single one of Salahuddin's ancestors is going to be like him, right? So over time, people are good, people are bad. So now, there were some issues going on. A new group comes up known as the Mamluks. Mamluk literally means, does anyone know what it means? Slave. So it literally means slave. So you have this group. So usually we always talked about families, right? People, Seljuks, named after Seljuk. Fatimids, they attribute themselves back to the Fatima. Buwayhids after the name of leader and tribe and all of that stuff. Now you have a group of people known as the Mamluks, the slaves. So where in the world does this come from? Well, these are Turkic people. Okay, the Turkic people coming from the northern Caucasus area. Okay, the Caucasus are the region above Armenia, Azerbaijan, that kind of area. This is known as the Caucasus. Georgia, modern, not in America, okay, Georgia near Russia, this region is known as the Caucasus. So these are, when we say Caucasian people, this is where it's coming from. So they're that kind of people. They have a lot of Roman influence and everything, but there's Turkic people from that area. So this is just south of Russia. Just like south of Russia, in that part, near to the left of, to the west of Central Asia. Okay, so this is where they're from. So they somehow came and settled into Egypt. Now, how did they settle into Egypt? Okay, they were taken as slaves because they were prisoners of war. So when you're a prisoner of war and you lose a battle, that's how you become a slave. So they were transported as slaves into Egypt, and over time, because of Islam, they were freed. So when they started getting freed, they were previously slaves. What happened was they were in the army and they rose to power. So they started getting all the power and they kept the power among themselves. Said anyone who came from slavery at that time and was liberated, now we're going to establish the rule among our own people. So they're known as the Mamluks, meaning the people who were former slaves. And in fact, it's said that, it's so interesting, some of the local Egyptian, quote unquote, Egyptian people at that time, they wanted to be like the Mamluks. They were like the hot people at the time. They were like the celebrities. But the Mamluks said, you can never join our ranks. You can never be like us unless you were a slave before. So some of the Egyptians started selling themselves into slavery so that they could get freed and become one of the Mamluks. Very interesting, how history plays itself out, right? So the Mamluks were like the big thing at this time. So they took over for Egypt, they took over North Africa, and this was when the Mongol invasions were going on. So the Mongols were invading and sweep the whole area, and you have the Crusaders launching the 7th Crusade. So the Crusaders are still, coming in as well. So this is a really dangerous time for Muslims, particularly in Egypt, because the Mongols have taken over this entire region, right? This is like the whole, more than half of the Muslim world has been taken over by Mongols. Now you have the Crusaders coming back into Syria because they only care about this part. So the Crusaders are coming here now. So now what happens is, if these two groups ally together, guess what's going to happen to Egypt? Egypt is gone, North Africa is gone, and the Mongols had the vision of going through Egypt, through North Africa, coming up through Spain, and taking out the entire Roman and Byzantine Empire. And they were a very powerful force at this time. So what happened was, this is where the Mamluks had a major contribution, because they actually fought off the Mongols. And they stopped the Mongol advance, because at this time the Mongols had never lost a battle. And people started thinking that they're literally invincible. People have, superstitious thing. They were literally invincible. In fact, some stories say that people were so afraid of the Mongols that they would come, one Mongol soldier would come, and there was 50 people, 50 Muslims there in front of him. And he says, if he didn't have a weapon to kill them with, he would say, you know what, you wait right here and I'm going to be back, and no one better move. And he would go, get a weapon, come back, and none of them, they were so scared they wouldn't move, and he would go and kill all of them. That's how how much fear they had of the Mongols. So what happened was, the Mamluks had a very important contribution. In the year 658, Sultan Qutuz, he stopped the Mongols in their tracks at a very important battle by the name of Ain Jalut. Okay, there was a battle of Ain Jalut in Palestine. So this is like their first major, or perhaps first ever major defeat that they ever faced, and it kind of stopped them in their tracks. Now, it was not only the Mamluks who defeated them. What happened was, their leader at the same time, his name was Monke, all the way back in Mongolia, he was killed. So he died. So now you have internal strife. And this is important because in history what you have is, whenever you have internal conflict somewhere, you find that everything else elsewhere starts going down and starts getting messed up. So there was internal strife, and the Mamluks were able to retake Syria from the Mongols, and now the Mongols' power starts diminishing. But things happen even better than that, because Allah has a plan, And can you imagine these people who are literally killing people left and right, stacking up their bodies by the thousands and thousands? What happens? One of them decides to go, and one of the leaders accepts Islam. All of a sudden, I mean, you would never imagine that these people would ever accept Islam. And it's a very good lesson, because if anyone looked at the Mongol people at this time, they see these are the furthest people from Allah. These are the worst people on the face of the earth. They can never be guided by Allah. The message can never reach them. And then you have this very important figure come up, and his name was Ghazan. And Ghazan accepted Islam. And he changed his name to Mahmud. And he was a leader, and he started saying, now we're going to implement Islam as the official state religion. And people start opening up, the Mongols start opening up to Islam, and more and more and more people start coming into Islam. So completely changed. And this is, if someone says that Islam was spread by the sword, this is the exact opposite, right? These are the guys who are using the sword to literally wipe out the Muslims, and then all of a sudden, they decide, you know what, we're going to become Muslim. So they accept Islam. Now at this point in time, they're not the most practicing people, because they just kind of converted. They're still learning. The educational institutions are almost destroyed. The books have been burnt and destroyed. So it's going to take some time for them to transition. But at least outwardly, they're Muslim now. Prior to that, they were mostly Buddhists. Some of them were belonging to different religions, other religions and all of that, or they had no religion. So now you have things changing. So this was in the year 1295, which is equivalent to 674. Okay, so 674, this is when the guy embraced Islam, and you see things changing up. So this is in the main part, central part of the Muslim world. Now let's go back to Spain. So what's been happening in Spain this whole time? So in Spain now, the Christians, remember we talked about the Reconquista, which refers to the reconquest of Spain? Well, it's been going on this whole time. So while the Muslims are getting weak everywhere else, it's also getting messed up in Spain, such that every single city in Spain has been taken back by the Christians, except one, and that's the city of Granada. One city is left. That's it. But even though the other cities are left, there are still Muslims living in different regions outside of Granada at this point in time so far, and we're going to see what happens afterwards. That's what's happening in Spain. And then in Morocco, the Al-Muwahhidun, which we talked about, the Almohads, or whatever you want to pronounce it, they lost power in the year 1269, which is equivalent 667. So they lost power in the year 667, and what you have left in northern Africa, in Morocco and Algeria and this region, and Tunisia, you have a bunch of rival Berber tribes fighting amongst each other for power. So now no one in North Africa or Morocco is going to help the people in Spain, and the people in Spain they've lost almost everything. There's only one main city left that's in control by the Muslims. So you have regional instability, you have problems in Spain, you have the Mamluks kind of putting the Mongols back, but this is a very problematic period in Muslim history. So now we're going to see next week, inshallah, this new force arises which gives hope back to the Muslims by re-establishing Muslim power, and they're known as the Ottomans. Okay, so we're going to cover them next week, inshallah ta'ala. Questions? Keep in mind, this doesn't mean that every book has been destroyed, because there's copies of books. So the copies that were in Baghdad were most likely destroyed, but there are copies everywhere else. So in very important books that there were a lot of copies made, they were in other regions. So you can't destroy all of them, right? They were in people's houses, for example. So you're not going to destroy all of the houses. But books where they didn't make too many copies, or the books which are really huge, like 80 volumes, 100 volumes, it takes too long to make copies of those books. Those were destroyed. Those were probably the first books that got destroyed, because you don't have so many copies of them. Books like Al-Funun, for example, Al-Funun by, I believe it's Ibn al-Athir. No, Ibn Asakir or Ibn al-Athir. Al-Funun, 800 volumes. Right? So 800 volume book, the majority of it was lost. Because who's going to copy 800 volumes? Right? Who's going to write 800 volumes besides Ibn al-Athir, first of all? Right? SubhanAllah. Who's going to read it in the first place? No, I mean not really. Because the thing is, look, any group that comes into Islam, they're gonna bring some baggage with them. So there's gonna be people who modify properly, and there's gonna be people who try and mix their history with other stuff. So the Turkic people did the same thing, the Persian people did the same thing, Kurdish people did the same thing, the Arabs did the same thing. Right? So you can't pick one group and say, oh, you mixed your ideas this way. So you can maybe look at some of the ideas and say, oh look, that's mixed with this culture. But who's responsible for that? Is it all the people from that culture? Not necessarily. Anyone can go and mix their, things. Sufism started before that, before the Mongols. So no one can say that was a shamanistic beliefs from the Mongols and all that. Sufism started way before that. No. You have very important people before, like Junaid al-Baghdadi and all of that. I mean, they were in Baghdad before it was destroyed. So they were very important. Abdul Qadir Jailani and all of that. They were before that time. Yeah, we skipped the other crusades because they were not that significant. So they never recaptured Jerusalem. They kept attacking and they kept taking different cities along the coast, but they never took Jerusalem again. That's it. Jerusalem was finished. Because they were getting weaker and weaker as well. So what happened to the Muslims and what caused them to lose all these lands to Crusaders and Mongols and all of that? So they were divided amongst themselves. A lot of them had gone away from their Islam. There were different, deviant beliefs coming up and everything. So they've gone away from the path of Islam. This is what happens, right? When you go further and further away from Islam, this is the punishment of Allah from you, and it's also for you to learn your lesson. So you have you have generations of good people come up. Like the whole generation of Salahuddin and everything. Where did they start getting this, motivation to do something about it? It's because there was a problem. And what happens is when people get very relaxed and they're just chilling out and enjoying themselves, that's when you start getting lazy. Right? So Allah sends different ways of teaching us lessons. The question is, why is it that right after, soon, like 30 years after the Prophet ﷺ, they started fighting. Muslims started fighting amongst themselves and everything. The first thing to tell people that look at what they were fighting for, right? They actually had a cause, and their cause was a misunderstanding about how to implement justice because Uthman was killed. So there's actually a decent cause there. Number one. Number two, the people who started this problem were not these people, not the role models that we look up to. Right, these were instigators coming from underneath. It's number two. Number three, the Islam does not say, and this is a false view of Islam. A lot of people have this idea of Islam that the Prophet ﷺ came, struggled for how many years? 23 years. He struggled for 23 years. Right? Almost every day of his life there was some kind of struggle going on. Right? And now all of a sudden, because Islam is spread throughout Arabia and is getting to different parts of the world, the struggle ends and everyone else is just downhill, easy from there. He did the 23 years of struggle for us, and we just sit back and we relax and we enjoy all the fruits. That's a misunderstanding of history. Because if we're supposed to be understanding, we're supposed to be imitating the Prophet ﷺ, and we're supposed to be learning from his life, what does that mean? That means we learn how to struggle, how to deal with the situations that are similar to the situations that he went through. That's what he is as a role model. Otherwise, Allah would have made like 10 years of hard struggle and then 10 years of just relaxation. See the Prophet ﷺ just enjoying himself, the Sahaba just chilling out, eating and drinking and doing business, and everything's fine. That would have been a model for us. Okay, you struggle a little bit, then you just chill out and relax. But what we think is 23 years he struggled and now it's our turn to relax. Anytime there's a problem, what happened? What went wrong? What are we doing wrong? We should be relaxing. That's not the point. So every generation of people, they have to undergo their own struggle. Right? And I was talking to Sheikh Faqih about this. We've been reflecting back and forth on some of these aspects of history. And we came up with a very interesting, this is an observation that we came up with. Basically is that every single generation of people, they're going to encounter the same type of struggles that the Prophet ﷺ had to go through. Whether it's Meccan style struggles or Medinan style struggles. There's going to be successes, victories, and there's going to be losses and defeats and oppression and tyranny and all of that, just like the Prophet ﷺ went through. What Islam teaches us is not that you enjoy yourself. That what Islam teaches you, how to live as a Muslim through those struggles and how to serve Allah through those struggles. And that's really the purpose of Islam. And that really, I think, that actually helped me clarify a lot, and even just, reflecting upon it. So it's a very important point of reflection. I'm glad you brought it up. That's what we need to understand. It's not just some, sometimes when we zoom out and we say, oh, well, Spain was just all this rosy picture and so great. Or imagine we lived in Baghdad when all the science and everything was advancing. It doesn't mean that there weren't struggles going on over there as well. There were struggles. So the thing is, everyone has to undergo their own struggle. And we learn how to deal with those things through Islam, the right way, rather than the wrong way. So what he said was, usually in history we're taught that the Arabs dominated Islam, and the Arabs were responsible for everything. But now you're like, what happened to the Arabs? They're not even that significant. The thing is, the Arabic language became dominant and prominent, but no, it was not the Arab people, because they weren't the majority of. If you look at all the places where Islam reached, the Arab population was only a certain part of it, right? So I mean, they didn't have so many children, and everyone else stopped having children, such that Arabs displaced everyone else. What happened is people started adopting the Arabic language. So that's where the influence of the Arabs was. Otherwise, no, there was Islam has a rich history of people. So far we've covered how many people? Major players. We've covered Arabs. Who else? Persians, Berbers, Turks, Mongols, South Asians, Central Asian people who were more Turkic people and so. Who else? Turks, and who else? One more group, Salahuddin, Kurds. Right. So we have a lot of different people, and then we're going to move next class to different people down the African coast, Malaysians, Indonesians, and so on. I think they had come into Hijaz as well, at least part of it. What part and exactly what time, I have to double check that. Yeah. So Hijaz is not just this isolated place. It has been conquered by quite a few people. 3rd century. So Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, 3rd century. No, I agree with you. This is an important book to have, but I don't know of any source. It's like if you ask me, can you recommend some good books in English on where we can learn more about Islamic history? No, I can't, unfortunately. Whatever you read, it's so messed up that I wouldn't even recommend that you read it. That's how bad it is, unfortunately. No, it's from different random sources. So I could recommend to you 10 books, and if you read all 10, you'll be okay. But if you read 7 of them, you're going to get messed up. That's the problem. That's how problematic it is. You find the strangest statements. You find statements like Arabs were, like I mentioned some of these, from people like Karen Armstrong and people who you think that are very more objective or inclined towards Islam or something. They just kind of throw out these ideas. It's just sometimes you just can't help yourself, or I don't know, whatever it is. One day I would like to, I didn't get a chance to visit her when I was in the UK. Next time I go, I'm going to try and make an appointment and ask her, how in the world could you write something like this? Really, I wanted to go and ask. I just didn't have the opportunity near her school, but I didn't get a chance to visit. But it's shocking how someone can write something like this. Just ridiculous stuff. As a basic student, and that's why as a basic student you have a basic picture of history, and you can understand. Let me give you a simple thing. I already brought this up before, but let's see if you can still remember. So one of her arguments that she makes, and Alan Silverstein makes in his book, and a bunch of just famous authors. You find all these books in Barnes and Noble, and being taught in major universities and everything. So one of the things they said is that the Arabs would not fight their own wars. They would go and they would get slaves, and we're talking about early period of Muslim history. They conquered Persia, and they conquered the Roman Empire, or Syria, that whole region, Palestine, everything. They conquered it by using all slaves to fight their battles, and they wouldn't fight their own battles, and they were sitting back in Arabia. Now, what's a simple response to that? Exactly. Why in the world would all the slaves start going and fighting on their behalf, first of all? That doesn't make any sense. The second thing is what? The jizya, okay, the jizya that they were paying. What else? So jizya that they were paying indicates what? You're not going to be drafted in the army. So if you're paying jizya, right? So what else? Right, so the Persian, okay, that's another. So the Persian and Roman Empire was being conquered at the same time. Okay, what else? Exactly. The Sahaba are going, what names are we talking about in the battlefield? Who's leading the battles? Who's commanding the right flank and the center flank and the left flank? And every single major name that you fight, it's all the companions in the beginning who are fighting the battles. So how in the world, where did you get this idea that all of a sudden the Sahaba are just sitting in Medina praying and everyone else is just fighting their battles for them? Why in the world? That doesn't even make any sense. Just basic logic wouldn't make any sense. And it's being taught in major universities in the world. Right? It's really sad. So just the students can't question it because they don't have a holistic view of history. That's what I've been trying to give you in this class. That's why we've been speaking, because you get it. You have a now zoomed out picture. So if somebody comes and says, "Hey, you know what?" I'll give you an example of how this can help you. Somebody comes and say, "You know what? We need to follow this group of scholars who lived in 1300 CE. Right? These are like the best scholars that ever lived around this time." Right? What would you say? Say, you know, these are the books that we need to follow, and this was the best example and the best model and everything. You say, well, wait a minute. When did the Mongols come and destroy everything and mess up, you know, all the books and scholarship and everything? That's when scholarship was on the decline. So you're telling me that this is the best period that we're supposed to look back, and these are the greatest scholars or the greatest books, and we shouldn't look at anything else, and this is the period of decline of scholarship. So you want to tell me that the period of decline in scholarship is going to be our role model for the future of scholarship? You should know better than that now, right? That's not necessarily the best time. That's not where you're, in the age of decline, you're not producing the best results and the most enlightened minds and the most intelligent minds. So people need to see beyond that. Right? So because of your understanding of history, you can understand a lot of these things. When people say, oh, you know, this group of people, they're not loyal to Islam, or they had too much culture or whatever, you look at what period of history they were in, what was going on in the Muslim world in a different time, and now you can understand. If you say, hey, well, why are all these, you know, Turks sitting in Turkey? Now you understand why they're there and where they came from. Right? And you say, well, why do they speak their own language, and why don't they speak Arabic and all that stuff? If you go and you look at Persia, you say, well, why is there so much Persian influence? That must be because there's a lot of Shia influence. Because if you only know Iran today, and you say, look, see all these cities were, you know, Nesabur and all these Khwarizm and these important cities, you say, well, oh, these were all Persians. They must be Shia as well, because you don't know history. So if you know history, it makes more sense, and you start putting everything into perspective. So that's why it's very important to have like a zoomed out view, so you can put things in place and you can understand what's happening where, and you get a little bit background understanding of how to process those events. Right? So this is all very important. Yeah. But you tell them the atheists, all right, have always been in the minority, and most of them, whenever they rose, they were wiped out as well. So what's to say that atheism is not going to end very quickly? Yeah, but that's whole another thing. So either you focus on the science part or you focus on the history part. Okay, so there's a long answer and the short answer. Short answer is, battles where the most people died ever in history has been which battle? Ever in the world, history of the world. World War I, World War II. Fought over what? Non-religious, secular people fighting for power. Right? So if that was the bloodiest, worst war that ever took place, and there's no religion involved at all, then what do they have to say about that? So you can't, you know they say you can't have your cake and eat it too, right? You can't argue this way and say, oh, religion results in war. And you say, well, look, the worst wars ever in history had nothing to do with religion. No. We don't want to look at that. We just want to focus on the religion part. You can't do that. That's not, you can't play, you know, your argument that way, right? If you're going to go and pick on this, say, okay, let's look at everything and let's put all the variables in the equation. They don't have any argument left. But this is a topic for Thursday's class. There is no need to sugarcoat the Shia Sunni. And are you in Thursday's class? Okay, we're covering all the Shias on Thursday, inshallah. Every Shia group on Thursday, inshallah. So come Thursday. Yes. Check the notes. The notes will be up tomorrow. They'll be up tomorrow. No, we're done with unseen matters. So we're just about done with that, and we're going all the groups in the Muslim world today, main groups. Okay? I recommend you do really good in the Arabic class so that you can access the original Arabic sources. Yes, that's what I recommend for you. Even the Arabic is not easy at all. It's very, very difficult. Yeah. So I recommend you do really, really good in the Arabic class. And the original sources are very tough to understand. How many of you have taken about 5 or 6 classes minimum so far of CIS? Okay, so bonus question for all of you. As you know, the day of Ashura is coming, according to some tomorrow or the Thursday. So who can tell me what we need to know about Ashura that we learned in 3 different classes? Or where we talked about Ashura in all 3 different classes? Brother Azizan. Stories of the prophets? Story of Musa, good. Okay, that's 1. Islamic law, where did we talk about it? Fasting, yes, in fasting. And number 3, what happened in Ashura? Hussein got martyred, right? Exactly. Azizan got it, mashallah. So the thing is, so we should know, number 1, what happened. Okay, first of all, we covered in stories of the prophets. That Prophet Musa obviously crossed the river, and everyone knows that story. That's what the day of Ashura is about. Then we covered about fasting in Islamic law 1. And then we covered how Hussein was martyred on the day of Ashura. It just happened to be on the same day. Just coincidence. Okay, not necessarily that the significance is there. Because everyone in the community now, Ashura is coming up, and they're wondering like, so what's going on and this and that. You already have the foundation as CIS students regarding all of this. It just needs to be pieced together. Right? It could be, but where is the link between Hussein dying on this day and Prophet Musa? It wasn't a little thing for sure, but there are other important personalities who have also died on this day, and there are other personalities who are more important than Hussein, like Ali, who was killed, and the Prophet ﷺ, who was killed on a different day, who died on a different day. All right. So the death of somebody on a particular day, which happens to be a special day, doesn't make the day special. It can maybe make their death maybe a little bit more significant. Right, so that's important to understand. Okay, alhamdulillah. So we got the tools for that. So what should we do, by the way? So we're supposed to be fasting on this day. Sheikh Faqih pointed out a very good point, and that is that Al-Qura calendar says that Ashura is on Thursday, and the fiqh council says, the local fiqh council says it's on Wednesday. So he said to be on the safe side, Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah, he says that you should fast either the day of Ashura or a day of Ashura and a day before. And he doesn't accept the narration which says or a day after. So Sheikh Faqih's advice is, the best thing is to fast on Wednesday and Thursday. If you want to, just be on the safe side, at minimum. If not more than that, or less than that. Yeah, that's true. It would be the day after if it happens to be Wednesday. But you're still okay because there is a narration and a lot of scholars take that opinion. Okay, so then you'd still be okay. You at least hit the day of Ashura, hitting Wednesday and Thursday. So this is his advice. Alhamdulillah, we go with his advice in IOC. Yeah, if you want to do more, you can do Friday as well. And if you want to do less, you can pick one. Inshallah, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik nastaghfirukallah wa natubu ilayh. Assalamu alaikum.